Picture a 21-year-old girl from Quezon City stepping onto the most famous patch of grass in the world. And by the time she walks off it 2 weeks later, an entire country has stopped what it was doing to watch her play tennis. If you had told anyone this was coming a year ago, they would have laughed you out of the room. Because this is not supposed to happen to players from the Philippines, a country where tennis has never been the sport, where the national obsession has always belonged to boxing and basketball, where the idea of a homegrown player even qualifying for a Grand Slam may draw used to feel like a stretch, let alone becoming the tournament's most talked about story. But here we are. And her name is Alex. And what she did at Wimbledon this July is the kind of thing that gets written into the permanent record of a nation's sporting history. So let's actually walk through how it happened. Because the story deserves more than a highlight reel. It deserves the full shape of it, round by round, moment by moment, because every step of this run tells you something different about who she is. Start with where she walked in, because it matters. Alex entered the 2026 championships as the 29th seed. Which sounds like a modest number until you understand what it actually meant. She had just become the first player in the history of Philippine tennis, man or woman, to ever be seeded at a Grand Slam tournament. That alone would have been a headline in any other year. A nice accomplishment. A nice quote for the local papers back home. Instead, it turned out to be the opening line of a much bigger story. She arrived in London off the back of a genuinely electric stretch of grass court tennis. She had just won her second career WTA title at the Birmingham Open, then followed that immediately with a run to the semifinals in Berlin, where she knocked off 2 top 10 players back-to-back. Elena Rybakina, Elena Ostapenko. The kind of results that tell you a player isn't riding a hot streak so much as arriving at a completely new level entirely. That is the version of Alex who walked onto Wimbledon's outside courts for round 1. Chapter 2. Round 1. Business Round 1. Mexico's Renata Zarazua. No drama, no scares, no extended battles at crucial moments. Just clean, businesslike, dominant tennis. 6-1, 6-2. Comfortable from the first game to the last. And with that win, her Wimbledon paycheck started. £80,000, which works out to somewhere around 6.5 million pesos for a single afternoon of work. That number alone would stop most people in their tracks. But she wasn't finished. Not close. Round 2 brought her up against Australia's Maya Joint. And this one had a scare built into it. She dropped the first set 3-6. Kind of result that makes you wonder if the run is about to end quietly in the second round the way so many promising Grand Slam debuts do. The kind of result that tests everything. The mental resilience, the tactical adaptability, the ability to stay present when the scoreboard is telling you that the momentum has shifted against you. And then she flipped the entire match. 6-2, 6-0. Taking the last 12 games in a row. Absolutely suffocating her opponent from the moment the second set began. Not grinding through it, dismantling it. Turning a match that had seemed to be tilting away from her into a demonstration of exactly the kind of controlled aggression that had made her so dangerous all grass season. Just like that, she was through to round 3. Another payday attached. £126,000. Somewhere around 10 million pesos. And if the story had stopped there, it already would have been a fantastic Wimbledon for a 29th seed. A second round at a Grand Slam. A comeback win. Prize money that would have represented the highlight of most careers. But then came round 3. And this is the match. This is the one that turns a solid tournament into a genuine phenomenon. Waiting for her on center court was Iga Swiatek, the defending champion. World number 3. A 6-time Grand Slam winner who had lifted this exact trophy 12 months earlier in such dominant fashion that she became just the second player in the Open era to win a Slam final without dropping a single game. That is who Alex had to face. On the court where Swiatek had been crowned queen the year before. What unfolded was a 2-hour, 14-minute battle that had absolutely no business being that competitive on paper. The first set alone lasted nearly 90 minutes and came down to a tiebreak. 10 points needed to settle it, 7-6, 11 points to 9. And then in the second set, Swiatek actually broke serve. Had a real chance to steady the match and pull it back to something manageable. A chance to remind everyone watching exactly why she had the trophy in her hands 12 months ago. But Alex broke straight back. Immediately. Without hesitation. Without panic. And from there, she simply did not let go. Closing out the second set 6-2. When that final ball landed, when it was over, she dropped to her knees on center court. in tears, because she had just beaten the defending Wimbledon champion on the court where that champion had been crowned. The number attached to that particular afternoon was £185,000, close to 15 million pesos. But honestly, by that point, nobody was doing math anymore. Everybody was just watching her walk to the microphone for the on-court interview. And what she said next is the part of the story that traveled further and faster than any scoreline ever could. Still catching her breath, still visibly overwhelmed, she started talking about the players who came before her, the players whose careers she had studied and admired. And she said something like this: maybe for someone like IGA, who's won so many slams, or someone like Serena or Venus, this might not seem like a big deal. But for someone who grew up in the Philippines, and then she couldn't even finish the sentence. The emotion just took over. The words stopped. And what she said instead, once she found her voice again, was that she used to train with her brother and her grandfather every single afternoon after school. In her own words, "My ruffled socks and my light-up shoes and chubby cheeks." She said that memory, that image of the little kid she used to be, was everything to her in that moment. It is worth sitting with why that clip spread the way it did. Because it wasn't manufactured. It wasn't a brand campaign or a carefully crafted social media moment. It was just a young woman who had spent years grinding through junior tournaments and lower-level pro events, suddenly standing on the most storied court in tennis, connecting the dots out loud between the little girl who trained on ordinary courts back home and the woman who had just dethroned a defending Grand Slam champion. For a country that has never really had a global tennis star to call its own, that moment landed like a gut punch of pure pride. You could feel it ripple through timelines and group chats and living rooms across the Philippines within minutes. Her grandfather, by the way, wasn't some elite coaching figure pulling strings from behind the scenes. From what she has described in past interviews, he was more of a club player himself, someone who loved the game, who read about tennis obsessively and watched countless matches, who used those afternoon sessions with her as a way to bond, to build a routine, to instill the kind of discipline that never shows up in a stat sheet, but shows up everywhere else. In how a player behaves under pressure, in how they carry themselves when a match is slipping away, in how they respond when the moment is bigger than anything they have ever experienced before. By her own account, every time she does something important in her career, she thinks of him because he worked so hard and sacrificed so much to help get her here. That is the emotional core of this entire run. 2 days later, she was right back out on court. 4th round. Italy's Jasmine, the 13th seed. A former Wimbledon finalist from a player with real pedigree on this exact surface, and a game built specifically for grass. And this is where we need to be honest about how the story actually ended, because it would be easy to only tell the triumphant parts. But the real ending matters just as much. Alex fought hard. She took the match to 3 sets, but Paolini won it 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. And just like that, the run was over, 1 match short of the quarterfinals. Here is what is worth understanding about that loss. It does not diminish a single thing that came before it, because simply by reaching that 4th round, simply by making it into the second week, Alex had already rewritten Philippine tennis history. She became the first player from the Philippines, man or woman, to ever reach the second week of a Grand Slam tournament. And the financial reward for getting there was already locked in regardless of the result against Paolini. £300,000, somewhere in the range of 24 million pesos. On top of everything she had already banked in the earlier rounds. This single tournament, across 4 matches, delivered her the largest payday of her professional life. By a wide margin. And it came with something arguably just as valuable. 240 ranking points that lifted her 4 spots to a new career high position around world number 28. Think about the arc of that for a moment. She walked into the tournament as the 29th seed and walked out of it a better ranked player than when she arrived, despite the loss, because the run itself was that significant. When she spoke afterward about how she was feeling physically and mentally, there was a phrase she used that stuck with a lot of people. She talked about needing to enjoy the process, even when it is a roller coaster. Even when there are tough moments. And she called that enjoyment her superpower, which tells you something genuinely important about how she is wired. Because plenty of players chase results and burn out chasing them. But she seems locked into the process itself, the day-to-day grind of getting better, independent of whatever the scoreboard says on a given afternoon. Because this Wimbledon didn't come out of nowhere. It was the visible peak of a much longer climb that most casual fans never saw. Back in 2022, US Open Junior Girls title. The kind of result that gets you noticed inside the tennis world, but rarely means anything to the general public. Then in 2025, the Miami Open breakthrough, a WTA 1000 event, reaching the semifinals as a wild card, knocking off 2 top 10 players, becoming the first player from the Philippines to ever reach that deep into a tournament of that size, the first to crack the world's top 100, a run to her first tour-level final in Eastbourne, a first WTA 125 title in Guadalajara, finishing that season with a career-high ranking of 50th in the world. Along the way, injuries, a shoulder problem that disrupted part of her hardcourt season, losses that never made headlines, the ordinary, unglamorous reality of grinding through the tour week after week without cameras paying attention. All of that groundwork is what made this Wimbledon possible. It was not a lightning bolt out of nowhere. It was the compounding result of years of exactly the kind of discipline her grandfather helped instill in her as a child. She left home at 13 years old to train at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, which means she spent her entire adolescence away from her family, away from the Philippines, chasing something that most people in her position would have been quietly told was unrealistic. A tennis career built from a country with almost no professional infrastructure for the sport. No deep pipeline of coaches and academies and tournaments the way players from Spain or France or the United States have access to. And she made that sacrifice anyway. The 13-year-old version of herself is presumably somewhere smiling right now, because look at what it built. There is also something worth noting about how she talks about her own success. Because in the aftermath of the Swiatek win, when asked what she hoped young girls would take from her story, she pushed back gently against the idea that they should want to become the next her. She said it would be an honor to inspire people. But she does not want kids growing up wanting to be the next Alex Eala. She wants them to want to be the first version of themselves, to find their own path rather than copy hers. That is a genuinely mature way to think about legacy for someone who is only 21 and still very much in the middle of building her own career. And that path, as she has described it, is not paved with trophies and viral interviews. It is paved with early mornings, sore shoulders, missed celebrations, and 12-hour training days that never make it into a highlight package. She has been pretty direct in crediting a broader cultural work ethic for that mentality, saying Filipinos in general are hard workers who show up when it counts, which lands differently coming from someone who has actually put in the work to back it up on the biggest stages in the sport. And the broader cultural weight of what she did deserves to be named directly. The Philippines has had global stars before in other sports, most notably in boxing. But tennis has never had a figure like this. Someone who can walk into the world's most prestigious tournament, beat a defending champion on center court, and turn an entire nation's attention toward a sport it never previously cared much about. You could see the ripple effect in real time. Filipino senators publicly praising her as a reason to invest more in grassroots youth sports. Social media flooded with clips of her post-match interview. Fans who admitted they know nothing about tennis finding themselves emotionally invested in whether she wins her next match. That kind of cultural gravity does not get manufactured by a marketing department. It gets earned, point by point, set by set. On the court, she gained over 1,100,000 new Instagram followers during the Swiatek match alone. She is suddenly being discussed on platforms and in conversations that had absolutely nothing to do with tennis a month ago. The sampaguita stitched onto her visor. The Tagalog phrase worked into her clothing, one that translates roughly to once it grows, it cannot be stopped, which she chose for herself before the tournament even began. None of that was manufactured. And things that are real build real value in ways that manufactured things simply cannot fake. Maybe the most useful way to close the story isn't with the prize money, even though the numbers are genuinely staggering. It isn't even with the history-making seeding or the record-setting 4th round run. It is with the image of her on her knees on center court, still crying, trying to explain to the world what it meant for a kid who trained after school in ruffled socks and light-up shoes to end up beating a 6-time Grand Slam champion on the same lawn where that champion had been crowned the year before. Because that is the part of the story that doesn't fade once the ranking points get recalculated or the prize money gets deposited. That is the part that gets passed down. The part that a new generation of kids in the Philippines are going to grow up hearing about. The day a girl from Quezon City knelt down on the most famous grass in tennis and told an entire country that all of it, every sacrifice, every early morning, every afternoon on the ordinary courts back home, every year spent away from her family in Majorca, was everything. And then 2 days later, she picked herself back up, lost a tough 3-set battle, and immediately started talking about getting back to work. Because if this run has told us anything about who Alex actually is, it is that she was never chasing a single tournament. She is building a career. And by every single indication, she is nowhere close to finished. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to Tennis Unfiltered right now. We covered every round of this Wimbledon run, and we're going to be right here for every chapter of what comes next. Turn on your notifications. This story is only getting started.